And thus, driven from Holy Terror and residing forevermore in the underworld, the sons of Horus, the treacherous 16th, became the Black Legion. From shame and shadow recast, in black and gold reborn. Scripture of Scryer, Dianthon. Black Legion. The Black Legion, once called the Sons of Horus, and originally the Lunar Wolves, is a notorious traitor legion of Chaos Space Marines infamous for their treachery. Their name is a curse echoing through humanity's fragmented and war-torn realms. They were one of the 9 first founding legions of Space Marines who turned against the Imperium during the Horus Heresy in the early 31st millennium. During this time, known as the Sons of Horus, the Legion became the primary force of their Primarch, Warmaster Horus, in his bid to overthrow the Emperor of Mankind and seize control of the Imperium for chaos. The Black Legion's crimes in the 41st millennium are so heinous that it is easy to forget their past, a time when Horus and his Astartes were celebrated above all others in the Legiones Astartes, and were the Emperor's most favoured warriors. Born as the 16th Space Marine Legion on Terra, they first achieved greatness as the Lunar Wolves. Before the Horus Heresy, they fought alongside the Emperor on Terra and during the early Great Crusade. They were stalwart, indefatigable, and exemplified what it meant to be Space Marines. Brutal, ruthless, unwavering, yet honourable and once unquestionably loyal, the history of the Black Legion mirrors the ambition of the Imperium itself and the flaws that shattered the founders' dreams of unification and glory for mankind. Today, the Black Legion is a traitor legion of heretic Astartes, united in the goal of overthrowing the Imperium. Unlike their brethren, they avoid infighting and are the greatest servants of chaos undivided, always rallying in great numbers under their war master, Abaddon the Despoiler. Whenever the entire legion is mobilized, it signals the start of another of Abaddon's Black Crusades against the Imperium. The Black Legion is unique among the traitor legions for having changed its name post-Horus Heresy. Initially known as the Lunar Wolves during the Great Crusade, they were renamed the Sons of Horus in honour of Horus's achievements, particularly after the Imperial victory over the Orcs during the Ulanor Crusade. Despite his initial reluctance, Horus agreed to this change following a conversation with Primarch Sanguinius after failing to avoid war with the human Xenos hybrid Interrex. Following Horus's betrayal and defeat at the Siege of Terra, the Legion was renamed the Black Legion by their new Chaos Lord, Abaddon the Despoiler. This name was chosen after the Astartes painted their power armour black in mourning for their Primarch's death, and in shame for failing to overthrow the Emperor and conquer the galaxy for Horus and the ruinous powers. The Black Legion inherits both the most glorious legacies of the Great Crusade and the vilest treacheries of the Horus Heresy. Their Primarch, Warmaster Horus, was once celebrated as the greatest of the Emperor's sons and later despised as the greatest traitor. Of all the infant Primarchs scattered across the galaxy before their creation was completed, Horus grew up closest to Terra. Horus matured on the world of Chthoniya, settled early in mankind's star exploration, and exploited for its rich resources until they were depleted. Horus grew up among the anarchic gangers of this post-industrial world, filled with extinct mines and decaying hive city spires. Many of the early Space Marine Legion recruits came from the hyper-violent gang scum of Chthoniya, and it was there that the Emperor found his first and most beloved lost son. For 30 standard years, the Emperor and Horus embarked on the opening campaigns of the Great Crusade side by side, with the Primarch learning directly from his sire. When the Emperor sensed the proximity of another Primarch and left to find him, he placed Horus in command of the Imperial armies. Horus was well suited to this role, and the lessons learned over 3 Terran decades served him well. As each Primarch was reunited with their sire and brothers, Horus increasingly stood out as the greatest among them, the first among equals. Many brother Primarchs and their respective Astartes legions excelled in specific military fields, but Horus was a natural leader. His greatest talent was uniting divergent allies into a cohesive force, a skill that extended beyond the battlefield to interactions with newly contacted worlds. Horus adapted to the traditions of each new world's population, a highly successful approach repeated by the expeditionary fleets. Unfortunately, this practice might have contributed to his fall, leading half the Space Marine legions with him. After the Imperium's greatest victory, the defeat of the largest Orc empire ever encountered, Horus was titled War Master, Commander-in-Chief of all the Emperor's armies. The Lunar Wolves, his legion, were renamed the Sons of Horus in honor of this victory. The Emperor returned to Terra to oversee the next phase of his empire's creation. On the feral world of Davin, Horus was struck down by a malady from the Chaos artifact known as the Anatheme, potent enough to harm even a Primarch. During his treatment or recovery, Horus was inducted into Davin's warrior lodges, specifically the Temple of the Serpent Lodge. It is likely during this process that he was corrupted, leading to his eventual downfall. Emerging changed from his illness, Horus spread the practice of warrior lodges throughout the legions. With this spread came the Chaos taint that had corrupted the War Master, sealing the galaxy's fate. As the foremost Primarch, Horus had always enjoyed his brother's confidence, even amid rivalries. Through masterful manipulation and deception, he subverted the loyalties of those closest to him while undermining or diverting those who would oppose him, such as Rogel Dawn, Guilliman and Sanguinius. The War Master's plans were impeccably coordinated, with each Primarch experiencing events that determined their stance in the ensuing civil war. Imperial scholars debate how many of these events were orchestrated by Horus and how many were coincidence or the work of the ruinous powers themselves. Events reached a critical point when Horus virus-bombed the remaining loyalists in the nascent traitor legions on Istvan III. This act was so dire that 5 entire Astartes legions were dispatched to confront him. At Istvan V, the War Master revealed his true intentions. The first wave of legions sent to confront Horus made planetfall only to find themselves betrayed. Overwhelmed, the Salamanders, Ravenguard and Iron Hands, later known as the Shattered Legions, tried to link up with the second wave. However, the second wave, consisting of the Word-Bearers, Iron Warriors, Alpha Legion and World Eaters, turned on their brothers, leading to the infamous Drop Site Massacre. This civil war plunged the Imperium into chaos, splitting the Imperial army and the Titan legions of the Mechanicum in half. Nearly every world was touched by the conflict, costing countless billions of lives and culminating in Horus's assault on Terra. As the conflict neared its tragic conclusion, uncommitted legions raced through the warp, converging on Terra in such numbers that they could defeat the traitors assaulting the Imperial palace. In the end, Horus lowered the shields of his battle barge, inviting the Emperor to teleport aboard and confront him. In the ensuing battle, Horus was killed by his father, his soul completely annihilated with no trace left. However, the Emperor sustained such grievous wounds that only his ascension to the life-sustaining Golden Throne prevented his death. As Rogel Dawn carried the Emperor's body from the War Master's battle barge, the traitor forces began a fighting retreat. Amid the chaos, Horus's body was recovered by his legion. After battling their way out of the Sol system and fleeing to the Eye of Terror, the Sons of Horus established themselves on a world that became both the tomb of their lost Primarch and a fortress from which they would launch further attacks against both fellow traitor legions and the Imperium. Without their illustrious Primarch, the legions struggled and desperately sought power from each of the Chaos gods in turn, inviting demonic possession and the costly blessings of the warp. During this time, the Legion also endured jealous attacks from former allies in what became known as the Legion War. Eventually, a rival faction, the remnants of the Emperor's children, stole Horus's body from its tomb, possibly to clone him and create a new and even greater War Master. Salvation for the Sons of Horus came when one of their greatest captains, Ezekiel Abaddon, led an assault on the Emperor's children, destroying the Primarch's body and heralding a new era for the Legion. The traitors changed their name again, this time to the Black Legion, in reference to their now black-adorned armor. Through Abaddon's actions, the Legion was revitalized, rekindling the belief that none could oppose them and that they would one day inherit the galaxy. Abaddon prepared his warriors for what he termed the Long War, a campaign spanning 10,000 standard years to achieve what Horus could not, the conquest of Terra and the death of the false emperor. When the warbands of the Black Legion and their allies rally under the banner of Chaos Lord and Warmaster Abaddon the Despoiler, the words of Horus echo in their battle cries, "Let the galaxy burn." Legion history. You will try. But today you face the Emperor's sons and his warriors. We are the Lunar Wolves, and this legion is the anvil upon which you will be broken. We are the anvil. Now behold the hammer. Commander Horus Lupercal, during the compliance of Melchior. When the Emperor first began to extend his gaze beyond Terra, he assembled new armies for his great crusade. These forces were partly drawn from the troops that had unified Terra during the unification wars of the late 30th millennium, including willing Terran volunteers like those in the 16th Space Marine Legion, who were implanted with the gene seed of their missing Primarch, Horus. Additionally, recruits came from the Emperor's subjugated enemies, forming the first generation of Space Marines. Like most embryonic Space Marine legions, the 16th Legion's initial recruits were entirely Terran. Although exact details are scarce in existing Imperial records, many of the 16th Legion's early recruits are believed to have come from the hunter clans of the Jutigran Bowl and the Samsation subplate slums. The constant conflict and harsh living conditions on the desolate margins of Terran society had honed these people into ruthless and independent warriors, ideal traits for Space Marines. The 16th Legion waged war with aggressive fervour, often employing sudden and overwhelming shock assaults. Whether by genetic heritage or the Emperor's direction, they became known for swift, decisive battles and bloody campaign conclusions. Their attacks were often preemptive, marking the Imperium's initial strike or delivering a final fatal blow in ongoing conflicts. The first pacification of Luna stands as one of their most notable early victories, along with the breaking of the Coriolis enclaves and the 5 winter events that left lasting scars on Terran society. In the Capridian Sinks, traders and gamblers still refer to the Legion's number 16 as the Counting of the Wolf. The 16th Legion was known for launching surprise assaults, emerging from the night or dawn, carried by Stormbirds and Storm Eagles, flanked by Lightning Crow squadrons. Witnesses of these attacks recall that the Lunar Wolves were already engaging the enemy eye to eye before the echoes of their initial missile and shell strikes faded. These warriors were proud, humorless, and devoid of empathy, mysticism, or military ritual, setting them apart from the human forces fighting alongside them. Their aggression was controlled but evident in every action, fitting the needs of the era. The idea of the Emperor sending his wolves to subdue stubborn or potential enemies took hold in the emerging Imperium's consciousness, with the pacification of Luna, often considered the first battle of the Great Crusade, as its legendary source. The 16th Legion eagerly embraced the name Lunar Wolves after this campaign. The wolf's head became a common emblem, despite the near extinction of true wolves on Terra, where they existed only as genetic stock for engineered bioweapon beasts. The image of controlled savagery endured in Terran dialects, and Lunar Wolf commanders and officers began wearing pelts from these augmented predators. While other Space Marine legions would also adopt similar imagery, the Lunar Wolves were the first. The Lunar Wolves pioneered the practice of recruiting from worlds beyond Terra, initially drawing aspirants from the violent Hive City gangs of Chthoniya, a former mining world turned feral. Located in one of Terra's closest neighbouring star systems in the Segmentum Solar, Chthoniya was accessible to sublight spacecraft before the invention of warp drive. As a result, it had been colonised, built upon, and mined since humanity's early interstellar travel days, long before the dark age of technology. Due to this extensive exploitation, Chthoniya's natural resources were depleted centuries ago, and its ancient mining technology was reclaimed by the tech adepts of Mars. The remaining planet was abandoned, riddled with catacombs, crumbling industrial plants, and exhausted mines. Horus, the true Primarch of the Lunar Wolves, was the first to be recovered by the Emperor. His gestation capsule was cast through the warp by the ruinous powers, landing much closer to Terra on Chthoniya than the others, and he was found at a much younger age. While the early histories of many Primarchs are well documented, Horus's formative years remain shrouded in contradiction and omission. Although it is certain that the Emperor found Horus and that he took command of the 16th Legion early in the Great Crusade, details beyond these facts are inconsistent. Some sources claim Horus was found on Chthoniya as an orphan, thriving in the harsh environment and learning the arts of war and killing from the tech barbarian kill gangs. Another source suggests Horus returned to Terra and grew up alongside the Emperor, learning from him as they reclaimed the Sol system and forged alliances that created the Imperium of Man. There are also claims that the Emperor found Horus, his first lost son, but the exact location remains unspecified. Surrounded by millennia of myths and allegories, the truth of Horus's origins may never be fully known. Regardless of these uncertainties, Horus was the Emperor's only son for many standard years, creating a strong bond between them. The Emperor devoted much time to teaching and encouraging Horus, who was soon placed in command of the 16th Legion, also known as the Lunar Wolves. 10,000 Astartes created from his genetic code. Leading these superhuman warriors, Horus accompanied the Emperor for the first 30 years of the Great Crusade, which began around the year 800th of the 30th millennium. Together they spearheaded the initial interstellar expansion of the nascent Imperium of Man. By the time the Great Crusade began, Chthoniya's mines were long exhausted, but the planet provided a resource the Imperium needed more than metals and jewels: millions of hardened fighters and survivors, a race of killers well versed in the universe's horrors. Located relatively close to Terra and maintaining intermittent contact even through the Age of Strife, Chthoniya's population was among the first to be marked by the expeditionary fleets leaving the Sol system. To fuel the growth of the early Space Marine legions, the Imperium exploited Chthoniya's bounty. During the first founding, Chthoniya supplied the necessary recruits for the Selenar gene rights of Luna to create the early Legiones Astartes. Reports indicate that Imperial recruitment squads harvested tens of thousands of Chthonian gangers, transporting them in chained holds of prison shuttles to Luna's Geno laboratories. Most were conscripted into the Imperial Army regiments, but the finest specimens were inducted into Space Marine legions. On Luna, these chosen sons of Chthoniya were transformed into the superhuman Astartes of the 16th Legion. Initially, most Space Marine aspirants were adolescent volunteers from Terra, and later from feral or feudal worlds discovered during the Crusade after the Primarch's rediscovery. However, after psycho-hypnotic indoctrination and mental conditioning, the Lunar Wolves created from Chthonian men emerged as fierce and powerful Space Marines. The Chthonian Genostock significantly remade the 16th Legion. While the Terran Space Marines formed the core, their new Chthonian brothers introduced their own customs, attitudes and modes of thought, products of generations of violence and survival. These traits were only partially suppressed by indoctrination, perhaps intentionally. As the Terran legionaries fell in battle, their voices and ordered military traditions became less prominent within the 16th Legion. The marks of change were subtle, enhancing rather than overwriting the Legion's culture. Chthonian traditions, such as sporting topknots and mohawks, became common among the Lunar Wolves. Honoring the valor of fallen enemies by scratching their helmets and adopting the Chthonian term Abathan for killing an enemy gang killer in single combat also became widespread practices. The personal charisma and reputation of a commander within the Legion extended to the Astartes under his command, influenced by the leadership styles of Chthonian gang lords. This was especially true for the Lunar Wolves' Primarch Horus, whose cult of personality was deeply ingrained within the Legion, leading all Lunar Wolves to revere him to a degree that ultimately led to their downfall. The inclusion of the Chthonians did not weaken the Lunar Wolves, rather it seemed to enhance their strength in battle. The Legion maintained the flexibility to fight any war or enemy on their own terms, but they favoured sudden and overwhelming force, a strategy also preferred by their Primarch. This doctrine became intertwined with the Legion's savage ferocity, a product of Chthonian blood, and was wielded with the ferocious intelligence and unmatched tactical instinct of Horus. Often, a star system targeted for Imperial compliance would fall to the Legion in a single engagement. Lunar Wolves warships would form a spear formation at the system's edge, breaking into smaller groups to strike at planets, moons, and space stations. Their tactics involved orbital bombardments and simultaneous mass orbital drops to break the enemy's strength and will. Tactical threats were identified, isolated, outflanked, encircled, and destroyed with merciless precision and close-quarter savagery, akin to apex predators splitting a herd and killing its members with swift ferocity. Imperial army troops that followed often had little to do but clean up the aftermath. The Lunar Wolves' approach was direct and brutal, achieving results that were often inelegant but undeniably effective. Their swift and bloody progress earned them many victories and laurels, particularly for their Primarch, Horus, the Emperor's most beloved son. Repeatedly, the Lunar Wolves would crush resistance on a world and move on to the next campaign without hesitation. Their tenacity and ruthlessness were evident during the initial Imperial conquest of the Sol system, where they prosecuted battles with the same savage mentality as the Chthonian gang wars, viewing prisoners as unwanted burdens. Their strategy involved identifying and obliterating the enemy's strength and leadership, much like a gang leader targeting a rival. The Lunar Wolves conquered entire star systems with this brutal efficiency, driven by the necessity of short, decisive wars to avoid prolonged and wasteful conflicts. The 16th Legion's methods matched the needs of the early Imperium's rapid expansion. For over 200 standard years, the Lunar Wolves waged war during the Great Crusade, pushing back the darkness that had engulfed mankind during the Age of Strife with fire and blood. Their victories were numerous, and Horus's leadership became legendary, earning the respect of their brother legions to unparalleled heights. Across tens of thousands of battles, the Lunar Wolves were rarely defeated. They excelled in every mode of deployment, whether spearheading a star cluster-sized assault or supporting an Imperial army formation. Other legions, sometimes wary of their fellow Space Marines, often requested to campaign alongside the Lunar Wolves and welcomed their support. Much of the Lunar Wolves' reputation reflected the qualities of their Primarch. Horus's charisma, unmatched record of victories, and known closeness to the Emperor earned him respect unrivaled among his brother Primarchs. Horus demonstrated a near supernatural ability to leverage the strengths of the other legions strategically. He was considered by many to be the greatest commander and ruler within the Imperium, second only to the Emperor. Horus commanded the respect and loyalty of all, backed by his strategic and tactical genius. While other Primarchs excelled in specific areas or commanded larger legions, only Horus could simultaneously hold every view and ideal of mankind. Even the most challenging and aggressive Primarchs, like Angron and Konrad Curze, often deferred to Horus on many matters. "You are like a sun, and together we have all but conquered the galaxy. Now the time has come for me to retire to Terra. My work as a soldier is done and now passes to you, for I have great tasks to perform in my earthly sanctum. I name you War Master, and from this day forth all of my armies and generals shall take orders from you as if the words came from mine own mouth. But words of caution I have for you, for your brother Primarchs are strong of will, of thought, and of action. Do not seek to change them, but use their particular strengths well. You have much work to do, for there are still many words to liberate, many peoples to rescue. My trust is with you. Hail Horus, hail the War Master, the Emperor of mankind, during the triumph of Ullanor." Despite the many victories the Lunar Wolves had achieved during their years of relentless conflict, one victory would surpass all others and lead to their rebirth. The most significant triumph of the nascent Imperium during the height of the Great Crusade was the defeat of the largest Orc empire ever encountered. The Ullanor Crusade was a massive imperial assault against the Orc Empire ruled by Overlord Urlak Uruk. The capital world of this greenskin empire, where the final assault by the Space Marine legions took place, was located in the central Ullanor system of the galaxy's Ullanor sector. The crusade involved the deployment of 100,000 Space Marines, 8 million Imperial Army troops, and thousands of Imperial starships and their support personnel. This crusade marked the pinnacle of the Great Crusade's efforts to reunite the scattered human colony worlds. The Orcs of Ulanor represented the largest concentration of greenskins ever defeated by the Imperium's military forces until the Third War for Armageddon in the late 41st millennium. After the strategic brilliance of Horus led to the Orcs' defeat, the Emperor of Mankind returned to Terra to work on his grand project to open the Eldari webway for human use. In his absence, he appointed Horus to command the vast forces of the Great Crusade. Following the Ulanor Crusade, Horus was granted the newly created title of War Master, making him the commander-in-chief of all the Emperor's armies, with authority over all other Primarchs and every expeditionary fleet of the Great Crusade. Before returning to Terra to oversee the next phase of his stellar empire's creation, the Emperor suggested that Horus rename the 16th Legion the Sons of Horus, in honor of their Primarch and to signify his preeminent status among the other Primarchs. Initially, Horus declined this honor, not wanting to be elevated above his brothers, and so his legion continued as the Lunar Wolves for a while longer. However, Horus and the other Primarchs struggled with the Emperor's absence. Their feelings of abandonment over his decision to leave the Great Crusade to pursue a secret project, the purpose of which he did not disclose to his sons, sowed the seeds of jealousy and resentment. This ultimately led to the corruption that sparked the Horus heresy. Sanguinius. It should have been him. He has the vision and strength to carry us to victory, and the wisdom to rule once victory is won. For all his aloof coolness, he alone has the Emperor's soul in his blood. Each of us carries part of our father within us, whether it is his hunger for battle, his psychic talent, or his determination to succeed. Sanguinius holds it all. It should have been his. War Master Horus. Lupercal's private thoughts on who should have been granted the title War Master during the Great Crusade, it became evident that the Primarchs were not the flawless paragons of humanity they were intended to be. Despite their godlike physical and mental capabilities compared to ordinary humans, they possessed flaws such as vanity, egotism, hunger for power, jealousy, arrogance, and insecurity. As the Imperial War Master, Horus accepted his new responsibilities with earnest dedication, taking command of the Great Crusade. However, the Emperor's decision to withdraw from the campaign and return to Terra, as well as to reorganize the Imperium's political administration under the Council of Terra, led by his regent Malcador, caused significant dissent among the Primarchs and other Imperial factions. Only a few Primarchs, including a scheming Lorgar, remained steadfastly loyal to Horus during this period of conflict. Horus also disagreed with many decrees issued by the newly established Council of Terra, which sought to shift the burdens of taxation and administration onto newly conquered Imperial-compliant worlds. Worse still, Horus felt he was failing his father and was deeply wounded that the Emperor had not disclosed his reasons for secluding himself on Terra, or the truth behind his secret Imperial Webway project. These feelings of bitterness, resentment and frustration grew, eventually leading to catastrophic consequences. Horus's fate was sealed on the moon of the world of Davin, where his legion had been posted for a second time. During their previous visit 60 standard years earlier, the Lunar Wolves had adopted the native Davinite institution of warrior lodges. Originally simple fraternities of warriors, these lodges became tools for Lorgar, the Primarch of the Word-Bearers Legion, and his first chaplain Erebus to manipulate Horus towards serving the Chaos Gods. Lorgar and his Word-Bearers hailed from Colchis, a world defined by religious fanaticism, where they had long worshipped the Emperor as a god. They had sought to spread their cult of the Emperor to every world they added to the Imperium. However, the Emperor despised organized religion, blaming it for much of humanity's historical darkness. The Emperor publicly denied his divinity, banned religious worship in his empire, and demanded that his subjects embrace the imperial truth, the belief that science, reason and logic alone could create a better future for humanity. Lorgar did not take well to the Emperor's reprimand or views on religion, especially after the 17th Legion was humiliated by the Ultramarines Legion on the Emperor's direct orders at the world of Kur. Angered and wounded by the Emperor's rejection, Lorgar embarked on the pilgrimage of Lorgar to discover the truth of divinity in the universe. This quest ultimately led Lorgar to the ruinous powers of the Warp, who eagerly accepted his devotion. The Wordbearer's legion soon became entirely corrupted by the Chaos Gods, and Lorgar and Erebus were tasked with corrupting their fellow Space Marines, starting with Horus. During a battle against Chaos-spawned undead on Davin's moon, Horus was poisoned by a Xenos blade dedicated to Nurgle, known as a Kinnebrach anatheme. This blade had been stolen from the human civilization of the Interrex by Erebus after a disastrous first contact. Erebus gave the weapon to the chaos-corrupted Eugen Temba, a former Imperial Army commander who had been left on Davin by Horus 60 Terran years earlier. Temba had turned to Nurgle worship, becoming a bloated mutant and transforming his Imperial Army garrison into undead plague zombies. Horus confronted the Nurglite mutant Temba aboard the ruins of his Imperial cruiser. During the battle, the Chaos Blade inflicted a toxic wound on Horus's shoulder that his legion's apothecaries could not heal. 60 years earlier, when the Lunar Wolves had successfully brought Davin into Imperial compliance, they had entrusted the Word-Bearers, led by First Captain Kor Pharon, to guide the Davinite people toward the Imperial truth. Under Erebus's influence, the 16th Legion adopted the Warrior Lodges, which became instruments for Lorgar and Erebus to corrupt the Space Marine legions against the Emperor. After Horus was struck down on Davin's moon, Erebus seized the opportunity to further Chaos's plans. He persuaded the sons of Horus's warrior lodge to let Davinite shamans heal Horus. These shamans, secretly Chaos cultists of the Serpent Lodge, performed dark rituals that transferred Horus's spirit into the Immaterium. There, Horus witnessed a nightmare vision of the future, seeing the Imperium as a repressive, violent theocracy where the Emperor and several Primarchs, but not Horus, were worshipped as gods. Although this vision granted by the Chaos Gods was true, it was ironically an outcome largely caused by Horus's own actions. The Dark Gods portrayed themselves as victims of the Emperor's psychic might, claiming they had no real interest in the material world. Magnus the Red, the sorcerous Primarch of the Thousand Suns Legion, ventured into the Warp via sorcery to try and prevent Horus from falling to chaos. He explained to Horus that the vision he had seen was only one of many possible futures and that Horus alone had the power to prevent it. However, Horus, already consumed by jealousy and resentment towards the Emperor, was easily swayed by the ruinous power's false vision. The Chaos Gods' pact with Horus was straightforward. Give us the Emperor, and we will give you the galaxy. Motivated by his jealousy, desire for status and power, and anger at what he perceived as his father's abandonment, Horus accepted their offer. The ruinous powers healed his grievous wound and imbued him with the powers of the Warp. Renouncing his oath to the Emperor, Horus led his legion, now renamed the Sons of Horus, into the worship of the Chaos Gods under Chaos Undivided. He then sought to recruit other Primarchs to the service of Chaos, successfully turning Angron of the World Eaters, Fulgrim of the Emperor's Children, and Mortarion of the Death Guard, among others. Many regiments of the Imperial Army and several Titan legions of the Adeptus Mechanicus also joined him. Magnus the Red, foreseeing Horus's actions through his legion's use of forbidden psychic sorcery, attempted to warn the Emperor of the impending betrayal. Knowing he needed to quickly alert the Emperor, Magnus used sorcery to send his message. This message penetrated the potent psychic defences of the Imperial Palace on Terra, shattering all the wards the Emperor had placed, including those within his secret webway project in the Imperial dungeons. The Emperor, unable to believe that Horus, his most beloved and trusted son, would betray him, mistakenly perceived Magnus and his 1,000 sons as the traitors. The 1,000 Sons had long suffered from debilitating mutations due to the instability of Magnus's genome, and were known for practicing sorcery, which had been outlawed by the Council of Nicaea. The Emperor ordered Primarch Leman Russ, Magnus's greatest rival, to mobilize his Space Wolves Legion and the witch hunters, known as the Sisters of Silence, to take Magnus into custody and bring him to Terra for trial for violating the Council of Nicaea's prohibitions on psychic powers. While en route to the Thousand Suns homeworld of Prospero, Horus convinced Rus, who despised Magnus's reliance on psychic powers, to launch a full assault on Prospero instead. This was despite Magnus being willing to face the Emperor's judgment once he realized he was being manipulated by the entities of the Warp. In the days following his miraculous recovery, Horus's officers noticed a change in his demeanor. Using the Warrior Lodge within the 16th Legion, Horus began to subvert his officers and their Astartes to the service of the Dark Gods, building support for his rebellion against the Emperor. Having accepted the Emperor's earlier offer made at the Olenor Triumph, advised by Sanguinius, Horus had renamed the 16th Legion to the Sons of Horus, to subtly emphasize his status as the first among equals among the Primarchs. Now, he moved to further consolidate his authority. Aligned both body and soul with the ruinous powers of chaos, Horus envisioned an Imperium with himself, not the Emperor, at its head. Renouncing his oath to the Emperor, Horus led his legion in worship of the Chaos gods and sought to turn many of his fellow Primarchs to chaos. Horus, a master diplomat and manipulator, knew exactly how to exploit the psychological weaknesses of some of his brothers. His initial efforts were highly successful, turning Angron, Fulgrim and Mortarion to his cause. These were the first of many Primarchs and Space Marine legions that would follow Horus into betrayal. The majority of the Sons of Horus, already fiercely loyal to their Primarch, readily followed him into rebellion. They secretly renounced their oaths to the Emperor and supported Horus's ambitions and his new warp gods. The corruption spread to every Imperial Adeptor Horus interacted with, including a portion of the Mechanicum, eventually leading to the formation of the Dark Mechanicum and the onset of the Schism of Mars. Horus, knowing his Gene brothers well, used his familiarity to appeal to their pride, martial prowess and courage, while also exploiting past grudges and favours against the Emperor and other Primarchs. This strategy ultimately gained him the loyalty of half the Primarchs and their Space Marine legions. He first purged his legions of loyalists during the Battle of Istvan III and then nearly destroyed 3 loyalist legions during the Dropsite Massacre on Istvan V. The galactic civil war that ensued, known as the Horus Heresy, lasted 9 Terran years and witnessed genocidal death and destruction on an unprecedented scale. This conflict escalated rapidly, with legions striking desperate blows against each other across the Imperium. By the time Horus reached Terra, the Sons of Horus led a vast army of traitor Space Marines. In the ensuing battle, Horus's forces attacked the Imperial Palace, with Abaddon leading the charge. This marked the peak of the Sons of Horus's power. Never again would they gather in such strength or grandeur. Abaddon led the First Company and the black-armoured Terminators of the Justerin into the palace, decimating loyalist defenders with chain fists and power swords. Horus observed the battle from the bridge of his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit. He saw his armies trapped against the inner walls of the palace, with loyalist reinforcements arriving steadily. The battle in Terra's orbit was also turning against his fleet. Realizing time was running out, Horus made a final desperate move. In his arrogance and anger, Horus lowered his ship's void shields to allow the Emperor to teleport aboard for a personal confrontation. His gambit succeeded. In a blinding flash of light, the Emperor teleported onto the Vengeful Spirit to face his traitorous son. The two warriors clashed in a titanic battle, their physical and psychic selves locked in combat. Despite his rage and power, Horus could not prevail. Before the Emperor obliterated his soul, Horus managed to inflict a mortal wound on his Gene father. Abaddon was climbing over the heaped corpses of fallen Imperial soldiers when he felt the psychic howl that heralded the death of his Primarch. Every son of Horus sensed immediately that their war master had fallen, causing thousands of warriors to pause in battle and look up into the burning sky. The news spread like wildfire through the traitor legions, and the once promising assault began to falter. Abaddon swiftly teleported back to the flagship, arriving just in time to retrieve Horus's body. In a cry of profound pain and anguish, Abaddon vowed vengeance against the Emperor. He tore the lightning claw from Horus's arm and affixed it to his own, symbolically taking on his Primarch's blood debt against the Emperor. Realizing the battle for Terra was lost, Abaddon focused on saving the 16th Legion from total destruction. He fought through the remaining loyalists aboard the Vengeful Spirit, clearing the ancient vessel of resistance. The mortally wounded Emperor had already been taken back to Terra by Rogel Dawn, the Primarch of the Imperial Fists. Claiming the Vengeful Spirit, Abaddon and the Sons of Horus broke orbit, fought their way free of the battle and escaped into the void. Following the epic siege of Terra and the death of Horus, the Great Scouring ensued, a time of imperial reprisal and retribution. Loyalists annihilated countless worlds that had sided with Horus, leaving their corpses as a stark warning to others. The remaining traitor legions were hunted mercilessly, driven across the stars by pitiless loyalists. Abaddon and the surviving Sons of Horus sought refuge in the Eye of Terror, choosing to plunge into that maelstrom of madness rather than face extinction at the hands of the Emperor's vengeful forces. The Sons of Horus reached the Eye of Terror with the bloodied survivors of the Scouring, but the once mighty 16th Legion was reduced to a mere fraction of its former strength. Led by only a few remaining captains, the Legion struggled with their loyalty to their fallen Primarch and the harsh reality of their defeat. Without their glorious Primarch, the Legion floundered, turning to each of the Chaos Gods in desperation for renewed power. They invited demonic possession and sought the costly blessings of the Warp. Meanwhile, they suffered jealous attacks from former allies. As the traitor legions turned on each other, the Dark Gods manipulated their new playthings, reshaping the legions for their own ends in the endless war between the gods. Ezekiel Abaddon, broken by Horus's death and weary of war, abandoned the legion, wandering alone into the Eye of Terror. Meanwhile, the Sons of Horus carried their Primarch's preserved body deeper into the Eye, ignoring the wars raging around them. On the demon world of Mylium, a graveyard of steel and rust, they built a fortress, Lupercalios, from the wrecks of decaying vessels lost to the Warp, using thousands of slaves taken from the Imperium. Surrounded by living darkness and the bones of dead Warp dragons, the Citadel's spires and towers were fashioned from the prows of ancient void ships. The Legion interred Horus's body within a great tomb where many worshipped their fallen demigod. Horus's body hung suspended in a spiraling chamber of bone-white stone, bathed in flickering golden light, his perfect form watching over his sons. The deeds of Horus were carved into the crypt walls, each depicting a great battle or glorious victory. Each day, worshippers gathered in the shadow of their Primarch, renewing their oaths, unable and unwilling to find a new leader. With their Primarch dead and their legion on the brink of extinction, the Sons of Horus stagnated. Like many other traitor legions, they faced incessant demonic attacks in the early years within the Eye of Terror. They fought off an endless supply of demons, many succumbing to the uncontrollable influence of chaos and losing their minds and bodies to possession. Some within the Legion argued for offering their allegiance to a single chaos power rather than dealing with the demons of many gods. Most, however, warned against bowing to any outside power, remembering the yoke the Emperor had placed around their necks and wary of letting another master hold such sway. The 16th Legion's martial pride meant they would never fully accept a master not from their ranks, be it the Emperor or a chaos god. Lupercalios, the monument, was both a mausoleum for the 16th Legion and a stronghold. It housed the body of their Primarch, interred after the Terran breaking. Few other legions were allowed near the Sun's last bastion. It also served as a base from which they launched attacks on both the Imperium and their fellow traitor legions. The 16th Legion suffered jealous attacks from former allies among the forces of chaos, as the brief unity during the heresy dissolved into internecine rivalry, igniting the Legion wars. Some captains anticipated that they and their battle brothers would eventually be drawn into these wars and pushed for replenishing the Legion's gene seed stocks. They knew that no fortress, no matter how grand, could withstand a determined space marine assault and called for more warriors. However, most surviving captains believed the Warp would provide all the power they needed if they could master the methods of merging Demon and Space Marine. Even as wars between other legions raged across the Eye of Terror, the Sons of Horus remained largely aloof, focusing on raising their fortress and worshipping their Primarch's corpse. However, jealous eyes turned their way, and traitorous forces conspired to rob them of Horus's remains to further their vile ambitions. The body of Primarch Horus, with its potent genetic information and biological secrets, was a highly coveted prize. In a sudden assault, the remnants of the debased Emperor's children, greatly empowered by their pacts with Slaanesh, easily breached the defences of Malium and infiltrated the central chambers of the Sons of Horus's stronghold. They stole the body of the slain Primarch from its tomb, intending to deliver it to the dark apothecary Fabius Bile, who sought to clone Horus and create a new, even greater War Master of Chaos to restore the traitor legion's unity and fortunes. With their fortress in ruins and their legion decimated, the Sons of Horus faced the brink of extinction, teetering on the edge of becoming nothing more than a cursed memory. The 16th Legion devolved into infighting, succumbing to dark despair and uncontrolled rage. The divisions between the Legion's captains escalated into bitter bloodshed and murder as order completely collapsed. Salvation came when one of the Legion's greatest captains, Ezekiel Abaddon, returned from his dark pilgrimage in time to witness the battle from afar. In that moment, he saw with cold clarity that Horus's failure had led the Legion to this point, tearing each other apart in the blood-soaked ruins of Malium. Abaddon swore to succeed where Horus had failed in overthrowing the Corpse Emperor, and proclaimed himself the new War Master of Chaos. Disgusted by how far the Legion had fallen, he hunted down his fellow captains, quelling his rage with their final screams. In the end, Abaddon alone remained of the Legion's leaders, demanding obedience from his brothers. Some saw Abaddon as Horus's rightful and legitimate successor and willingly fell at his feet, while others recognized his raw strength and bowed to his might. A few turned their backs on Abaddon and were either cut down by their brothers or escaped into the warp. With his legion brought to heel, Abaddon turned his attention to the clones of Horus, commanding his warriors to eradicate all traces of their former Primarch and free themselves from his shadow. He personally led an assault on the Emperor's children, destroying Horus's body and all his clones, thereby ushering in a new age for the 16th Legion. He ordered the Sons of Horus to repaint their Viridian power armor black, symbolizing mourning and vengeance, and cast off the name Sons of Horus. From then on, they were known as the Black Legion. Through his actions, Abaddon reinvigorated the Legion, reviving the belief that none could stand in their way and that they were destined by the dark gods to one day inherit the galaxy. When the war bands of the Black Legion and other forces of chaos gather under Abaddon, the Despoiler's wrathful banner, to unleash yet another of their black crusades to overthrow the false emperor, the words of Horus echo in their battle cries, "Let the galaxy burn." Thus began the long war for control of the galaxy by Chaos and the Black Legion. With his control over the Legion secure, Abaddon focused on expanding the ranks of the Black Legion, driven by his desire to launch an assault against the Imperium. Word spread throughout the Eye of Terror that any Space Marine who pledged loyalty to the Despoiler would be granted a place in the Black Legion, and a role in his grand plan for revenge against the false Emperor. Many of the other traitors mocked Abaddon for his arrogance. However, the endless wars and corruption of the Warp had disillusioned others, and the promise of a place in a legion led by a warlord determined to continue the war against the Imperium appealed to many. The sting of defeat at the hands of the loyalist Space Marine legions was still fresh in the minds of many Chaos Space Marines, who hungered for a chance to spill the blood of their former brothers. Other traitor legionaries were indifferent to whose blood they spilled, caring only that Abaddon could lead them to worlds where they could inflict suffering and death. The legend of Abaddon also spread, and those traitor Marines who respected only strength, cruelty, and dark majesty began to see him as a Chaos warlord above all others. Abaddon soon earned a fearsome reputation among the traitor legions for the brutal vengeance he exacted on those who betrayed him. Some traitor legionaries and demonic warlords tried to manipulate the Black Legion for their own ends, infiltrating its ranks with false promises of loyalty. Others whispered in the ears of those who had sworn fealty to the Black Legion, attempting to turn them against the despoiler. In the end, the heads of all these Chaos champions and Chaos lords adorned Abaddon's trophy rack, their warbands destroyed and their fortresses razed. Eventually, only the very foolish or terminally insane would dare to break their oath to Abaddon, the despoiler. As a master manipulator, Abaddon knew the precise combination of fear, greed, and vanity needed to sway both men and demons. Warlords came before Abaddon to see this champion of chaos and his Black Legion for themselves, only to find themselves painting their armor black and joining his cause. As the Black Legion's numbers swelled, Abaddon ravaged the worlds of the Eye of Terror with his fleet, claiming more warriors and slaves for his cause. This time, he was careful not to present an easy target, keeping the Black Legion as a fleet-based formation, moving like shadows across the warp. Aboard the Vengeful Spirit, Abaddon waged war against other traitor legions, their allies and their enemies, creating an army to rival any force in the galaxy. The nature of the traitor legions was such that no individual warlord could ever rule over all of them. But Abaddon aimed to unite them toward a single goal, as Horus had done before him. He believed the Black Legion could only hope to destroy the Emperor and his Imperium with the help of the other traitor legions, combining their strength to overcome the armies ranged against them and launch a massive assault on Terra. This was Abaddon's dark dream, and the path that would shape his destiny for centuries to come. In the year 781 of the 31st millennium, 5 standard centuries after his retreat from Terra, Abaddon re-emerged into Imperial space at the head of a massive force of traitors and demons. This marked the Imperium's first encounter with the newly founded Black Legion and the return of a bitter and brutal enemy many had believed lost to history. Since the Great Scouring, Abaddon had remained within the Eye of Terror, rebuilding the Black Legion into a vengeful reflection of its former glory. Finally, the Black Legion and other traitor forces returned to real space, initiating the first chapter of their long war against the Emperor with the blood of Imperial worlds. Through alliances, threats and promises, Abaddon assembled the largest force of traitor legions seen since the Horus Heresy, catching the Imperium by surprise. Worlds near the Eye of Terror descended into chaos as legions fell from the sky and demons tore into reality. Only Cadia, with its formidable defences, held firm, its brave regiments defending from the towering gates and bastions of their cities. To counter the invasion, the Imperium was forced to divert many newly formed Space Marine chapters of the Second Founding from war zones across Segmentum Obscurus. The traitor legions revelled in their return from the Eye of Terror, bathing in the blood of innocents and filling the holds of their void ships with slaves. On numerous planets, the Black Legion proved their worthiness of their fallen Primarch and the martial prowess of the ancient lunar wolves. Abaddon had chosen his generals well, each competing for glory, as the Legion carved a bloody path across the stars. Zagthian the Broken led his warband in an orgy of violence and excess on the agri-world of Valesia. For his own dark pleasure, he constructed a vast maze of thorns from the world's blood-rose orchards, blinding his prisoners and releasing them into the twisting tunnels before hunting them down at his leisure. Countless inhabitants spent their final hours in terror, their flesh bleeding from thorn cuts, lungs filled with the sickly sweet scent of blood-rose. Not to be outdone, Erelak and his raptors brought nightmare to the floating hive cities of Melphia. Killing millions, Erelak's warband sent dozens of cities plummeting from the sky by destroying their suspensor arrays and venting their plasma reactors onto the fields below. Fashioning giant floating gallows from the ruins, Erelak hanged millions of Imperial citizens, their corpses doomed to drift across Melphia's skies as a grim reminder of the Black Legion's power. The Black Legion's greatest achievement lay not only in their brutal victories, but also in the unity they forged among traitors and their demonic allies. Though traitor Space Marines, demons and heretics often turned on each other once Imperial resistance was crushed, they grudgingly respected the Black Legion's dominance. Abaddon had created a legion of fear and domination, a sign of ominous times to come for the Imperium. The traitor legions, often led by the Black Legion or Abaddon himself, repeatedly spilled out of the Eye of Terror to burn and pillage entire sectors. In the light of dying stars and flaming cities, the Black Legion indulged their hatred of the Imperium, indiscriminately killing the Emperor's servants and tearing down symbols of the corpse god. During these Black Crusades, entire star systems were destroyed in conflicts that lasted decades or centuries. Suddenly, as they appeared, the Black Legion would retreat into the Eye of Terror, their holds filled with slaves and plunder. Segmentum Obscurus suffered terribly in these endless wars against the fallen Space Marine legions, but nowhere in the Imperium was safe from their treacherous reach. Time and again, the Black Legion proved their infamous reputation as a pitiless foe among the armies of the Imperium.